What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Now, it's been a little while since I talked about the Brandon Rios versus Manny Pacquiao fight. So, I just read an article, and Robert Garcia had some things to say about the fight. The fight is almost, in my opinion at least, being a little bit overshadowed by some other good matches. You got Juan Manuel Marquez and Timothy Bradley facing off a brand new match. I say it's being overshadowed by fights like that and Canelo and Floyd Mayweather, mainly because these matches I would not say are tailor made. I don't think either of these fights are tailor made. Like I think Timothy Bradley, depending on his game plan, can win, and I think Juan Marquez can definitely win based on his game plan. Same thing with Canelo. Either way, it's not going to be an easy fight for. I mean, if it is an easy fight, that's just because they're on two different skill levels. But on paper, I guess is what I'm trying to say. On paper, these are solid matchups. I don't see anybody with just all of the positive traits in their favor. Again, Mayweather, he's battling Father Time, and he's the smaller fighter. Canelo is the bigger. He weighs heavier. You can argue that he punches harder. Shane Mosley said they punch about the same, but for the fact that Canelo is a bigger person, we'll just say he punches harder. And he's younger, and he's hungry, and he's undefeated as well. So it's a very solid matchup. Now we have Mayweather. Mayweather, a master at what he does. He's looked good in his last fights. He's definitely seasoned. He has the experience at the championship level. So it's a good fight. Same thing with Marquez versus Bradley. Bradley didn't look too great. He went against his corner in his Ruslan Provatnikov fight. He did win, but he didn't look as good as he could have. He made the fight a lot harder than it had to be. So how much did that fight take out of him? He was getting rocked and he was basically knocked out on his feet. Marquez also had a tough, grueling fight with Manny Pacquiao, even though he shocked the world with that vicious right hand that he landed, knocking Pacquiao out in the sixth round. But rounds 5 and 6 were definitely hard for Marquez, and he's pushing 40. So I think these are very solid matches. Now on paper, Brandon Rios versus Brandon Rios versus Manny Pacquiao. This match seems more or less tailor made for Pacquiao. And the reason I say that is because Pacquiao has been fighting at the higher weight division. The fight's taking place at 147. That's a weight that Brandon Rios has never fought at. Even though he's a big guy, he's never fought at that weight. He's never went non-sparring 12 rounds, 12 championship rounds with a fighter like 147, with a fighter at 147, let alone with a fighter like Pacquiao. Someone with speed, someone who's had plenty of championship fights. He's been in there with tough competition, whether they're catch weighted or not. But he's been in there with seasoned guys like Margaritos, the Cottos, the Ricky Hattons, the Eric Moraleses, the Borderas. He's been in there with those types of guys. So it is a step up for Brandon Rios moving up in weight and facing Pacquiao. I mean, he's automatically moving up in weight and he's taking on probably one of the toughest people in terms of resume and experience at 147. Marcos Maidana's at 147, but he doesn't have, he's like maybe 3 fights deep into his welterweight career. The other person I would say would be Mayweather. Timothy Bradley, he's only a few fights deep into his welterweight career. He was fighting at 140, then he moved up to face Pacquiao. Then he fought Ruslan Provatnikov, so he's about 2 fights deep. So in terms of the top guys, Mayweather and Pacquiao are the guys that have been fighting in that weight division and have over 2 or 3 fights with other ex-world champions or champions. So that's a stern test for Brandon Rios. On paper, Pacquiao should demolish Brandon Rios. The reason this fight, to me, is intriguing is because Brandon Rios is an aggressive, pressure style fighter. He cuts off the ring very well. He's younger, and he's a big guy. And I really want to see how much Pacquiao has left. So that's the only thing that really makes this intriguing to me. If this fight were to happen anytime before Marquez knocked Pacquiao out, it would look like a blowout on paper. So to me, it's all about timing. Timing is everything in the sport of boxing. You got fighters like Roy Jones Jr., who was unstoppable from the late 80s all the way to the mid 2000s, mid to early 2000s. Antonio Tarver knocked Roy Jones Jr. out, ended his decade-long win streak, and I don't consider the Montel Griffin loss a real loss because, as we know, he was whooping Montel Griffin and he got DQ'd for a low blow on a downed opponent. So I don't really consider that a loss. I mean, per the rules, it's a loss, but I think he just got caught up. And when they rematched, he knocked Griffin out in the first round. So I don't think he naturally, if it weren't for that freak DQ, I don't think he would have lost to Griffin in the first fight either. Um, Anyway, he reigned supreme for over a decade. Antonio Tarver knocked him out. And the very next fight, he gets knocked out again by Glenn Johnson. And keep in mind, Glenn Johnson is a fighter who had about 40, 41 fights with 9 losses up to that point in his career. He had like 9 losses and 2 draws. So Glenn Johnson is not known for destroying elite fighters, or I mean, his resume was so. Again, to be 40 fights, you got to consider when you first start fighting, most of the time they're building you up, building your confidence up, and you're fighting bums. Most people don't get title shots right away. As you can see, Canelo, he has 40 plus fights, and maybe in his last 10 or 15, maybe fights, will you start recognizing some of those names as active people, the Carlos Baldemirs, the Josecito Lopez's, the Austin Trouts. But before that, he was battling whatever tests in Mexico. And there's a lot of fighters like that. Mike Tyson, if you look at his first 15, 18 fights maybe, he was fighting just journeymen and taxi cab drivers and bums. They were building him up, giving him the ring experience. They were trying to give him rounds, but he was just knocking people out early. So, moral of the story, timing is everything. Roy Jones Jr. is a perfect example of that. Someone who was dominant from the late 80s to the early to mid 2000s. He got stopped by Antonio Tarver. His very next fight, he lost to someone who had, in 40 plus fights, had 9 losses and 2 draws. And that was based on the timing. If Glenn Johnson fought Roy Jones before Antonio Tarver knocked him out, we may have seen a different outcome. But when you get knocked out brutally, it can take a lot away from you. When you get certain brutal TKOs or brutal knockouts, it can definitely take its toll, mostly on your confidence. And in the sport of boxing, confidence could be everything. When Roy Jones Jr. felt like Superman, he's dancing in the ring, he's showboating. He was almost unstoppable. And that one TKO set him back, and it's like he got old overnight. And same thing with Paul Williams. You look at people like Paul Williams. When Sergio Martinez knocked him out, that was unexpected. He had a very close competitive fight in the first fight with Sergio. He gets knocked out. And in my honest opinion, Paul Williams was never the same after that second round knockout in the rematch with Sergio Martinez. And that's where we've seen a new star being born, Sergio Martinez. His stocks went up because he knocked out Paul the Punisher Williams. Unfortunately, as you guys know, Paul Williams had a tragic accident, so his career was cut short. But even before that, I don't think he was the same after that. So again, with Brandon Rios versus Manny Pacquiao, what makes this intriguing, and it's not necessarily the matchup, because on paper, Brandon Rios should get ran through based on the way he fights and the way Pacquiao fights. Pacquiao fights fast. He's a fast starter. He has fast feet, fast hand speed. He's fought at championship level more times than Brandon Rios. He's fought better competition on his resume, whether they're a catchweight or not. Just the quickness, the hand speed, the reflexes, the footwork is better. And he has power. So that's almost tailor-made for the type of fighter Brandon Rios is, who is more or less a heave-ho type of fighter. You know you're going to be able to hit him. You know his game plan. It doesn't really change. It's more one-dimensional. It's like he's coming to knock your head off and fuck you up. And if he has to take shots on the way in, he's willing to do that. So that particular style seems to favor Pacquiao. In the past, what I've seen Pacquiao struggle with is more or less the smart boxer punchers, or more technical boxers, people who can counterpunch. If you watch the Eric Morales fight, if you watch the Marquez fight, if you watch the fight with Timothy Bradley, if you watch those types of fights, that's where you see Pacquiao struggle. People with ring savvy, who are crafty, who can counterpunch, who can slip punches, who can give lateral movement, and just overall harder to hit. Like Timothy Bradley, whether you think he won or lost, it's pretty much evident that Pacquiao did not look good in that fight. He looked pretty bad. He was fighting towards the end of rounds and just doing flurries towards the end. Bradley caused him to miss a lot, and he didn't look good. He didn't look like, if you watch David Diaz versus Pacquiao or Margarito versus Pacquiao, he didn't look like that against Bradley. Again, even if you think he won, I think it's safe to say he did not look superior. He didn't look great. And Pacquiao, being the fighter who was already fought at 147 before, he should have dominated the championship rounds, and he was the title holder, so I just feel like he should have dominated the championship rounds with Bradley, and he really didn't do that. Bradley actually came on late and looked worse early, and as the fight progressed, it looked like Bradley got his shit together and looked better and stole a lot of the late rounds. So if you were to give Bradley rounds, most of them would be mid to late fight. So again, this is an intriguing matchup. Robert Garcia says it's a make or break fight for Pacquiao. And I want to know if you guys agree. I definitely think it's a make or break fight for Pacquiao. If he gets knocked out, I think he might as well just hang him up. He's already accomplished a lot in the sport of boxing. He's done a lot for boxing. And if he gets knocked out by someone who's coming up in weight, it's just going to be people lining up to get those Manny Pacquiao, faded fighter who are past their glory days type of paydays. And they'll be lining up to knock him out. I think once your weakness is exposed and you no longer have that quote-unquote Mike Tyson aura where people fear you, where people realize you're not a machine and they see there's a way to actually beat you, that's where it becomes all-out war. And I think kind of what Khan is going through, Amir Khan, I think he's going through that kind of thing. He's been hurt so many times in his fights. People see that, and they see that as a vulnerability. And their game plan is now to pressure Khan, hit him with something that he won't be able to recover from. We've seen Bradis Prescott do it. Marcos Maidana came very close to doing it. Diaz came close to doing it. Danny Garcia did it. And if you see a fighter who looks vulnerable that many times, then that's when people are going to think they have your number. Now, people like Timothy Bradley, we're not used to him fighting Ruslan. The way he fought Ruslan Provodnikov, he looked like he was getting hurt a lot more than when he fought Pacquiao. So unless Bradley looks like that ongoing, it looked like he just had a chip on his shoulder. But if Bradley starts to look like that ongoing, then people are going to be like, oh, I got Bradley's number. We know how to defeat him. If someone looks suspect or they look like they're susceptible to the same thing, like Amir Khan looks susceptible to a left hook or to power shots in general, and if someone looks susceptible to those things, then other fighters are going to try to exploit it, especially if you're way up high on the totem pole, you're a cash cow like Pacquiao is, and they know they can make their name off of beating you. Look at fighters like Austin Trout. They beat guys who have been around the sport like Miguel Cotto, and his very next fight, he's getting another big payday, the biggest payday of his life with Canelo Alvarez in a sold-out Alamo Dome, 40,000 plus people. That's kind of what happens. It's like the passing of the torches. When you defeat a fight, even if they're fading, that kind of puts you to the next level. So if Brandon Rios can do it, that's going to push him to the next level. He's still younger. If Pacquiao loses, I think he should just really hang him up. But on paper, Pacquiao should kill Brandon Rios. But there is hope for Brandon Rios, and I hope he could pull it off, just to add variety and add intrigue to the sport of boxing. But on paper, Pacquiao should be able to beat Brandon Rios, and I think Brandon Rios' style is very tailor-made to make Pacquiao look good and to build him back with a credible name. So we'll see what Brandon Rios can do, how hard he trains, and we'll also see how much Pacquiao has in the tank and if he can recover from a devastating knockout. Let me know what you guys think. Brandon Rios versus Pacquiao. Does Rios have any chance in this fight? Let me know your comments. How does it play out? As always, hate, comment, or subscribe. Till next video, it's Ego signing off.